Hello, welcome sisters. Welcome to this session to our Hyde Park Stake Relief Society Women's Conference. My name is Zinta and I'm the Assistant Secretary for the London Hyde Park Stake. We welcome to you tonight to our session, Understanding Anxiety and Depression, presented by Sarah Miller. I'm just going to do a few housekeeping items and then we can sort of move throughout the evening. We are recording this session and we are also translating this session live into Portuguese. So any Portuguese sisters, if you go down to the bottom of your screen and you'll see an interpretation icon. If you click on that and click onto Portuguese, you'll hear the lovely Sister Joanna Dias translating for you from City Ward. Thank you, Joanna. Alex Anderson is our stake specialist and he's our tech support for tonight. So if you have any questions in response to the presentation, please forward those to him. Also joining me from the Stake Relief Society presidency is Naomi Notice. She is our beloved Stake Relief Society secretary. Naomi, do you want to give a wave? Thanks. In the event that this session is hijacked or any inappropriate content is shared, we'll be immediately disconnecting the meeting for all participants and will not resume. If anyone makes any inappropriate comments, they will be removed from this session. So just a little outline of what will take place. Sarah will be presenting for 40 minutes and then will be followed by approximately like a 15-minute Q&A. So as I mentioned throughout the duration of the session, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat, which is down below, and forward those to Alex Anderson. For data protection and privacy reasons, we are remaining anonymous in our questions, so you will not be identified. Naomi and I will facilitate the Q&A at the end of Sarah's presentation. So just before I introduce Sarah, our speaker, I'd like to just run through a few things that she suggested that would help get the most out of this session. So how to think about these questions, particularly in light of the topic, understanding anxiety and depression. What do you want to learn or achieve as a result of this session? What challenges and opportunities are you currently experiencing or anticipating? And we also invite you to do the following things: to find a quiet space, to turn off your mobile phone or put it to silent if it's not being physically used for this session, to close down any other programs on your laptop or computer, and to have a notepad to hand to write down any of your thoughts or reflections. There'll be some new information that you'll probably hear, so take note of those and the thoughts that you have. So I just wanted to introduce Sarah now. Sarah began her career in mental health as a psychiatric nurse. Her focus was group work with schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, and severe and enduring mental illness. Sarah is registered with the UK Council for Psychotherapy and is a psychotherapist and a systemic and family therapy practitioner. She has her own practice specializing in childhood trauma and mental illness, and she also serves as an area advisor for the family services within the church and as a first counsellor in the Cheltenham Stake Relief Society presidency. Sarah, just before you go into your presentation, can you just explain what your role is as an advisor within the church? Because I don't think many people know what that role is.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm also aware of speaking sufficiently slowly so that things can be translated. I'm getting.
Thank you.
I am called to work with 4 stakes. So I'm available as an advisor on anything mental health to any leaders within those 4 stakes. And there's more than one of us, obviously. So the UK is divided into different areas, and we serve to offer leadership and training and mentoring and support for leaders who are requiring information about mental health.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll now hand the time over to you. So feel free to share your slides.
Thank you. Let me do my share screen thingy. Okay, well, welcome. don't worry about the fact that it says neuroscience. I've deliberately chosen to speak tonight from a slightly different angle, because I think many of us might know something about anxiety and depression, and we might we might have our own experience of it. We might be working with it with family members, and we might have beliefs or even prejudices, perhaps, about what it means to be anxious or depressed. And so this evening, what I'm excited about doing is sharing a slightly different perspective, looking a bit more at what is actually going on in the brain, and how can understanding a little bit more about what is going on in the brain, how can that help us to treat ourselves and other people with more compassion. So my objective today is, at the end of it, is that we might think more kindly of ourselves, or more kindly of others who may be struggling with this issue. Okay, so here's the first thing to know about. So the brain, as it says, has 7 emotional systems. So we have these systems operate. They don't just, one doesn't operate and then another operates. They're working interchangeably. But we have the seeking system, which is the, as it says, the part that gets us up in the morning, that believes in ourselves, that the motivating part of ourselves. We have the rage system. We have the fear or threat, which is the part of us that it monitors for threat, and depending on our past experiences, will either kind of idle at a sort of baseline, or if we've had experience of trauma, our baseline may be moved up so that we in fact may operate at a higher level. And one of the things that I'm very interested in working with trauma is bringing people's kind of baseline a bit further down, because people who've been traumatized and had repeated trauma tend to live at a different level, which can make anxiety quite tricky. So we have the lust system, and it's no surprise to say that men and women have different systems when it comes to lust. I doubt that's a surprise to many of you. This is a women's conference, so we can say things like that. The care system, which is our kind of, as it says, the biological imperative to attach. So the DNA, it's in our DNA to connect and belong. The panic or grief system. So those of you with very small children will know about this. You know, when you just pop to the loo for 4 seconds, your child suddenly wails and demands that you return. And this is the panic or grief system being played out. How dare you pick the phone up if you've got a toddler? They will. My sister used to say to me, when I call them for supper, they don't appear. The minute somebody calls me up, suddenly they're all around my knees and won't leave me alone. And the play system, which is essential, an essential part of our learning system. And again, you will see in children. So the fear and care systems are impacted when we feel anxious. So the fear system is obviously overactivated, and the brain moves into when it's in its threat system, the fear or threat system, it's constantly scanning. And the care system, when the fear system is activated, the care system goes offline. So it's very hard. If your threat system is activated, it's very hard to then want to connect because other people are experienced as dangerous. So you're very frightened and you're very alone. And that makes anxiety really tricky. And then the seeking, grief, fear and care systems are all impacted by depression. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Okay, so we're going to be talking a lot about, or something about anyway, adrenaline and cortisol and oxytocin. And again, I imagine that most of you might know something about these hormones, but one of the things that is interesting to note that you may not know is that adrenaline and cortisol has a huge impact on memory. So the hippocampus, which is responsible for what we call sequential memory, the beginning, middle and end, that is impacted in the presence of adrenaline and cortisol. So we get sort of shards of memory. We can't remember things very well. It's hard to recount recent events if you have too much adrenaline and cortisol. And it's one of the reasons why traumatic memory, so memory of abuse or anything traumatic, cannot be disclosed in a very kind of straightforward manner because it hasn't been remembered in a sequential manner. And it's one of the things that, for example, when it comes to dealing or making a disclosure of abuse, people who've been abused will often have a very kind of jagged, almost incoherent memory, and people assume that somehow they're making it up, but in fact it's because of the presence of adrenaline and cortisol and the impact on the hippocampus. And oxytocin is, again, I imagine most of you will know, is the hormone that helps us bond. And very interestingly, it's exactly the hormone that President Nelson has been trying to get us to activate when he invited us to show gratitude. So I had some of my more cynical friends saying to me, oh, this nonsense about gratitude. And I was saying, no, it's genius. It's absolute genius. Because in fact, what President Nelson, who is a man of science, is inviting us to do is actually to get in touch with some very powerful hormones to help us feel better. So if you're feeling a bit cynical, you can rethink that now. Okay, so here is I think a really helpful chart that I'm not going to go into lots of detail. But I'm sure most of us have heard of flight and fight, which is the orange bit in the middle. And that bit is managed by the sympathetic nervous system, which you can see. And I've been talking a lot about this during the COVID pandemic, that if you have noticed that you've become more irritated, or just generally frustrated, it may in fact be a manifestation of your anxiety. You may be just thinking, why am I so grumpy? It may in fact be because you're feeling quite anxious. So that's the fight bit. And then the flight bit is the bits where we're constantly worrying and concerned. And so this is when our heart is racing a bit. We're feeling just kind of sweaty palms, tingling feelings. We're just not feeling, can't really settle. So that suggests that the sympathetic nervous system is activated, and we're just kind of generally struggling to what we call regulate, to manage our emotional well-being. And when it gets overwhelming, we can then move into the freeze bit, which is the blue section. And this is when there are times when things feel overwhelming. And certainly when you're trying to manage depression, this can be a place that people know well. And we know that anxiety and depression can often go together. And so some people can kind of, vacillate from feeling really, really anxious to then just having absolutely no energy at all, and then coming back to feeling anxious again, and going back and forth between these places. And so sometimes, because this can go on for a while, if we, for example, are functioning fairly normally, we can feel a bit grumpy or a bit irritated with people who are saying, oh, I can't do that, I can't get out of bed, it's too difficult. But in fact, if they have gone into this part, if they are in shutdown and freeze, this is a chemical response. It's not, of course, if it's your adolescence, it's a different issue. They're just being adolescent. But it may in fact be that people have gone into the freeze shutdown response and are actually really, really struggling. And certainly, I work with people who just getting out of bed and having a shower feels like a major, a major achievement. So again, these responses are real, and trying to manage these responses is incredibly difficult. And I'm sure many of you might know that if you're in flight and fight, it's just, again, is exhausting, which is why some people drop into freeze as a response to trying to manage the flight fight. And the place where we want to get to, and again, this is kind of underscoring the important use of oxytocin, is what we call social engagement, the green bit. And this is where, as it says, we are curious and open, we have compassion for ourselves, and we feel more grounded. And this is, oxytocin is helping us feel and what we call co-regulate. So Stephen Porges, who developed polyvagal theory, which is what this chart is, he said that the most successful people are the people who can co-regulate. He said the problem with Trump is that he doesn't know how to co-regulate. We were talking about narcissistic leaders at the time, but it was a very interesting insight that when we, it's an invitation that when we are at our most distressed, the thing that will comfort us the most is someone else, and that may be the most difficult thing to do. And that's what therapists do, is that we offer social engagement at a level that may be a kind of practicing or a bearable level until people are able to begin to co-regulate with other people, their support system. So we offer a bit of a bridge. That's the purpose of it. Okay. So the fear or threat system is triggered by the amygdala, which is the smoke alarm of the brain. So when that is on, as we said, the care system goes off. Because if you feel under threat, the last thing you want to do is make connection with someone else, because everybody else can feel too threatening. So you get placed into this awful dilemma where your thinking is telling you, I need to worry, and I need to worry about what people are doing or how they're looking or how they're behaving. And yet the way to be soothed is to make an important connection. So how do you resolve that? Particularly in the case of abuse, where you're wanting to attach, but you're also needing to recoil. So it's a very, very difficult dilemma for the person who's feeling anxious. And again, when we are dealing with people who are anxious, we can just want to, shut them, just stop it, just stop thinking like that. And people can, go over and over and ruminate over things. They can worry about things, and we think, well, that's just ridiculous. Of course, that's not going to happen. And people can get, trapped into, but what if that thing happens? And it's helpful to know that the reason that it's so difficult is because these things are going on internally in the brain, and in the body. And the purpose in sharing this, I'm hoping, is that you can feel a greater sense of empathy, I think, for yourself and for other people that you might be working with. Okay. I hope that I'm not leaving the interpreter miles behind, but I can't see her at the moment, so she's not waving at me. Okay, so the problems with adrenaline and cortisol is that they create a circuit of anxious thoughts or neural pathways with anxious feelings, which create an embodied sense of unease. So one of the things we know about when we think an anxious thought, a protein is laid down, which then is picked up. We get an anxious feeling, so another protein is laid down. So then we get, with the anxious feeling comes, oh, it must be something I feel really anxious, so there must be something to worry about. So there's another protein that gets laid down. And pretty soon we've got this kind of anxious, this anxiety feeling that began as a thought, but now is completely embodied. And so that kind of tricks us into thinking, well, it must be right to feel anxious because I'm feeling it in my body. But what we know is that once we can kind of manage our thinking, actually that embodied sense of unease starts to go away. And because the care system, as I said, is offline, we can feel and be alone. And as I said, it impacts the hippocampus. So the thing about adrenaline is that it's meant to be short acting. But if we have got a constant kind of rush of anxious thoughts, our adrenaline keeps getting secreted over and over and over again. And it's hard work. It's hard work. So we will talk a little bit about, well, this is all very well, it's all the bad news. How do we deal with it? We will talk a bit about that. Okay, so in depression, what we may not realize is that the grief system is actually activated. So people feel terribly, terribly sad, but can't quite figure out why. And it's because this system has been activated. The seeking system goes offline. So our energy, our motivation, the meaning of our life, the purpose is offline. So we just can't get motivated. Things that seemed, incredibly easy to do are now suddenly a major hurdle. I mentioned, getting in the shower, that just seems impossible. The threat system is activated. So there's grief and fear happening at the same time, but also the care system is offline because the desire to seek comfort is very much diminished. So you've got terrible grief, terrible worry, and the ability to manage some of that, to self-soothe, is also, as I said, kind of the volume on that is turned right down. So the very things that we need to help ourselves manage these feelings are unavailable. So to kind of, as you can see, there are 4 problems with depression. Okay. So when the grief system is activated, it results in panic, feelings of worry and loneliness, and feelings of despair and sadness. This can be linked to difficult relationships from the past, and people can often, they'll feel better in company, but if they are also anxious, then they won't want company. But the problem is that it comes in and out. So again, it's not something that is a constant. But in this kind of depression, the grief system is activated and the seeking system is deactivated. So all these feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness, what's the point? Again, talking psychotherapy, people can struggle to access psychotherapy. And then there's a hormone called dynorphin, which is apparently the miserable hormone, and that also has a role in deactivating the seeking system. So that this is new stuff. That studies about dynorphin are ongoing. But the second kind of depression is the one where it's harder to seek company with someone because we also are trying to manage anxiety. Yeah, okay. So why have I just spent all this time going on about, the science of it? Well, I think the more that we can know about what might be going on in our bodies, the more that we might be able to think about anxiety and depression in a different way. Because the good news is that the seeking system overcomes the fear system, and the care system helps the seeking system. So the thing that it says right at the top there is that depression and anxiety needs to be treated by a competent and qualified professional. So depression and anxiety are real, and they need to be dealt with by people who know what they're doing. The NICE guidelines, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, tells us that treatment with antidepressants and, if appropriate, sessions with psychotherapists, that's the gold standard. That's what the research tells us works. Whilst that's happening and people are healing, we can see that the part of our system that starts slowly to begin to feel that life is worthwhile helps us overcome our fear. And the care system. So if one of the kind of greatest mistakes I think that we can make, and certainly when I've worked in schools with kids, is the belief that if I'm mean to myself, if I just tell myself to work harder, study more, read the scriptures more, just get on with it, if I kind of have this sergeant major in my head to force me to do all the stuff I need to do, then I will achieve what I need to achieve. And the great insight for me about understanding about the brain systems is that, in fact, the more that we yell at ourselves and tell ourselves, just get on with it, the more that deactivates the seeking system, because we just start to get fearful. And as it says here, if our fear system is switched on and we don't have and our care system is switched off, we can just get lost in feeling anxious and afraid. But if we link the care system and the seeking system together, that overcomes our fear system. So by co-regulating, by connecting with someone else, we can start to heal. And it's a slow business. But the other thing we need to understand is that shouting at ourselves and telling ourselves off, comparing ourselves to other people, doesn't work. And I don't know how many of us do that, but I think particularly as women, we think somehow there's something helpful about being mean to ourselves. And the biology, the neuroscience tells us that that's not true. So my ambition for this evening is that we might understand the impact and power of compassion, and not meanness. So compassion works every time. Being tough on ourselves doesn't. And that's because of oxytocin. So the kinder we are to ourselves, and the more that we allow ourselves to receive kindness, the calmer our bodies feel. So if we, how many people are on the call? If I could see you all and you could all see each other, which I think is difficult because with my share thing on, and we all just decided to look and look on the gallery view and wave at each other and smile, we would get, there we go, I can see Zinta, she's waving and smiling at me. We get a rush of oxytocin. And you will notice this, even I went out yesterday and I determinedly, everybody I passed in the street, I smiled at. And the majority of people smiled back. And just that creates a flood of oxytocin and a sense of well-being within ourselves. So the more attached we are, the more resilient we become. The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other. And the best way to explain this is those of you with children or who have ever dropped a child off at school, the reason that they are able to go into school without falling apart is because they know that they exist for us inside our minds. So they carry an embodied sense of, even though mummy is going, she will remember me and I remember her, because those lessons have been learnt at home. So a child can leave us and know that we will come back, and which is why they don't, they don't just disintegrate. And with kids in family therapy, often with children who might be struggling with going to school, we can think about how strong is the attachment to mum and dad. So it's often an indicator that there might be some attachment issues there. Okay. This is a quote from Sister Jenna Kieran, who spoke at our sisters conference. She was ahead of the times because she actually she spoke live but filmed it and sent it to us, not knowing that this is exactly how we were going to be doing conferences in 2020. But she says this: each one of us, no matter what our age and no matter what we've been going through in our lives, no matter what we've done, what has happened to us or been done to us, no matter what we're struggling with, no matter where we are in our progression, we are adored and cherished by a Heavenly Father. Now, there may be some of you thinking, yes, I know this. I've heard this all my life. It's true, except it's not true for me. It doesn't apply to me. It applies to everyone sitting around me, everyone else in my family, but not me, because I'm an exception, because I'm struggling with this or that, or because this has happened to me. He cannot possibly love me. Well, let me be just one more voice telling you, your Heavenly Father loves you. And especially if you are feeling, no, it's not me, then this message is especially for you. Okay, so we're just going to spend a little moment to try and embed some of the compassion. Because whilst the neuroscience is interesting, or not, if you've all gone to sleep, this is the stuff I want you to remember. this is the stuff that's important. This is the stuff that you can carry, as I said, in an embodied sense in yourself. So ask yourself, when you're in a situation where you're being horrible to yourself, or you're feeling very stressed, or you're saying, these are all the things I'm rubbish at, ask yourself, what would the most compassionate part of myself say to me right now? And maybe you have to visualize that image with the savior and the little boy, or the little girl being held. Maybe you have to think, what would the savior say to me right now? If you're feeling panicky and overwhelmed, then try some breathing. So I'm going to teach you the 4-6 pattern, which is again linked to neuroscience. So all the theory you've just seen, 4-6 breathing will calm you down. It will bring you into the green zone that we just looked at. And you literally, you breathe in for 4 and out for 6. So we're just going to do that right now, because I want you to get that memory. So you just breathe in for 4 and out for 6. And again. And out for 6. And the other one, if you're really struggling, is if you put your hands on your shoulders and you, with quite firm pressure, bring them all the way down to your wrists. And you just do this, and you do the breathing. You will start to feel a really calm feeling right in your gut, because this is also linked to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calm down system. So if you're overwhelmed, try 4-6 and this. And if you're really struggling, reach out for help, even if you think there's no one to help me. Start with your ministering sister. Oh, they never come and see me. Start with your Relief Society president. Start with your bishop. Start somewhere. Start with someone you trust. Particularly if you're saying to yourself, as Sister Kieran reminded us, oh, no, not me. If you think not me, then especially you needs to reach out. Okay. So what I'm going to invite us just to think slightly differently. Instead of thinking, I wish I was like this person, or I should be better, or comparing ourselves, or judging ourselves for our body shape, or our education, or how many scriptures we've read today. What if we ask ourselves these questions? So if I'm going through a difficult time, what if I focus on my learning? What if I think about, what am I learning about myself? One of the things I've learned about myself is that I've become the mask police. So I make judgments inside my head about how people wear their masks. I didn't know this about myself. But to all the people who wear their mask below their nose, I want to go up to them and say, you're wearing your mask wrong. So what does that tell me about me? So that's the bit I need to focus on, is why do I need to be the mask police? So what am I learning about control, about myself? So what if I bring it back to me, rather than wanting to reach out and criticize someone else? What if I think, what am I learning? What if I lean into the sharp edges of this experience and think, oh, this is not a good experience, but again, what if I accept it rather than resist it? What if I say yes instead of no? What will I learn from that? What if nothing I've done has been a failure, but it's all learning? What if I'm not a failure? What if I'm exactly where I need to be right now in my life? And all the things that I think I'm supposed to have done don't matter, because I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And what if I am deeply loved? What if that is the most true thing about my life, however I think about it, what if I am deeply loved? One of my most favorite scriptures is the experience of the Savior in Mark chapter 14, where we know that the Savior speaks to Heavenly Father and says, in fact, let me just quickly read it. He says, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. So here's this image of the Savior saying, I don't want to do this, but nevertheless, I will do it. And then it says, and he went away and prayed and spake the same words. And that, the impact of that is astonishing to me, that he placed his life on the altar and then kind of and said, oh, this is difficult. And then he said, no, I'll do it. And then he went back and said, no, it's too difficult, but nevertheless, I'll do it. And all through that long night, it moves me deeply to think of his experience, that he was willing to do that for me and for you. And it reminds me that when I am struggling, and when I'm saying, yes, I can do it, no, I can't, it's too much, it's too difficult, that there is one who's been before me and who knows about putting it on the altar and taking it off, putting it back on and taking it off, and who knows about my anxiety and my fear and my worry and all the things I say to myself, and who nevertheless says, Sarah, all will be well because you are deeply loved. The purpose of our life here, if we are experiencing intense anxiety, deep depression, fear, rage, huge distress, the purpose is that as we go through these experiences, the ashes of those experiences will become beautiful. That through the trauma and the distress and the fear, we learn empathy and compassion and love and kindness and gentleness, so that we will understand that through our mourning, we experience joy, that those two are held together. We cannot have one without the other. It's a principle. It's fundamental to how this world works, and we need both. But we can be helped and loved and comforted as we apply compassion and as we open our hearts to receive compassion, so that the garment of praise can begin to replace the spirit of heaviness. My witness and my belief is that we are known and, as I said, deeply, deeply loved, and that whatever is going on for you at the moment, that experience is known by one who loves you beyond measure. And I leave these things with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Sarah. Just is worth some pondering for a moment.
Yeah.
And while we do that, if anyone has any questions, please pop them through onto the chat down below to Alex Anderson, and Naomi and I can put those questions forward. We did have one comment. I wasn't a question, but it was a big thank you for doing this. This lady is, she's a BACP. Can we explain what that acronym means?
Yes, it's the British Association for Counsellors and Psychotherapists.
There we go. She has 25 years of experience and has been trying to bring these things to the fore of our attention in Relief Society groups for years.
Oh, good.
It's been a bit lonely.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of her work has been with non-members, which she feels sad, but it has, of course, been a privilege. to be able to do that for non-members. So it was a big thank you to you for that. So I do have one question that's come through. Is it true that we sorry, let me just see if I can word that right.
It's okay.
I'm not quite sure if I understand how that question's worded. Is it true that we can have feelings of anxiety and excitement that are similar feelings with anxiousness, and tell ourselves it's feelings of excitement so it can help us overcome feelings of anxiety?
Yes, anxiety and excitement sit very close together. I remember once going out with a patient, my colleague and I, we took a patient out in the car park and we did handbrake turns, don't tell anyone. And you know, when the car spins round, and we said, look, it's exciting, isn't it? And that's the difference. Anxiety, excitement, they can feel quite similar. So I don't know that I would recommend that treatment, but yes is the answer to that.
Thanks. Hand over to Naomi for the next question. Keep sending questions through if anyone has. You'll need to take yourself off unmute, Naomi. Oh, do I need to do that for you?
Thanks, Inta. Yes, we did have another question. Menopause is a game changer. Have you got any insight around the menopause, Sarah?
Well, I'm in it. And self-care, it has to be self-care. And, you know, taking things very easy, setting the pace, you know, sleep is essential. Mindfulness, stretching, walking, you know, just taking very good care of your body. And also, I think, I'm just about to do another master's. So, you know, when you're ready, go and stretch yourself, you know, don't think that's the end of my life. Go and take on the challenge. But self-care, 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 compassion, compassion, compassion.
Thank you. Here's another one. Does depression in other contexts, for example, bipolar or postnatal depression, have the same biological mechanisms? Can they be addressed in a similar way?
Well, postnatal depression can come on very quickly and can escalate very quickly. So get help as soon as possible. Bipolar disorders is treated differently and is certainly medicated differently, and it's an experience of highs and awful lows. So there are different things going on. So I wouldn't say that whilst people experience depression, it's not the same illness as depression. And there are different time frames. So people cycle in and then out of feeling very, very happy, euphoric, and then can cycle into deep, deep depression. So that, again, it's quite a serious illness and needs to be treated appropriately. People can become very, very ill with bipolar disorder. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll take the next one. So yeah, we had another question through. I'd like to thank you for this entire lecture, but I wanted to ask a question. Is it normal to interrupt psychotherapy, even if I'm still not well? Because that's what's happened to me, and I'm afraid I don't have this therapy anymore.
I'm not sure that I understand entirely. Is it normal to interrupt psychotherapy? If you're saying that it has been interrupted because of the COVID situation, then, I mean, I know for myself, I moved all of my clients from face-to-face to online, and no, it's not good that if your therapy's been interrupted, that's not great. And I would either go back to your therapist or whoever is, if you're seeing someone through the NHS, I would go back and say, listen, I've been left without therapy, and that you need some support. It's not good to just break off from therapy. No, that needs to be worked through.
Thank you. And so I have another one here that's confirmed the things that you've shared tonight. This sister says, I just want to testify that when we seek help encompassed with the Lord's love for us, that peace and hope comes in abundance. As someone who has suffered with anxiety for many years, I have found these techniques that Sarah has spoken about really do work. Just need to keep practicing.
Oh, great. I'm glad.
So a lovely reminder there. So Naomi, do you want to just take the next one? Like, they're coming thick and fast now.
Yeah, just someone asking for a bit of clarification on mindfulness, as it might not be understood by everyone.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to do a quick mindfulness thing with me? If you don't know how to do mindfulness, have you got time to just do a very?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So this is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness exercise. Okay. So we're just going to do it really quickly. But just know, as we do it, I want you to notice what happens in your body as we start to do it. Okay. So I want you to notice 5 things you can see. And 5 things you can feel. And 5 things you can hear. And 4 things you can see. And 4 things you can feel. And 4 things you can hear. And 3 things you can see. And 3 things you can feel. And 3 things you can hear. And 2 things you can see. And 2 things you can feel. And 2 things you can hear. And 1 thing you can see. 1 thing you can feel. And 1 thing you can hear. And you just did mindfulness. Well done, everybody.
So can you just explain what the benefit is of doing that?
So the purpose of mindfulness is to bring us away from the past. And if we sometimes, we have anxiety, we're either in the past or in the future. So we're either worrying about what just happened or we're worrying about what's going to happen, but we're not often in the present. So one of the things that, in my experience, the Latter-day Saints are great at is praying, but we're not very good at meditating. So even when we are in the days when we could take the sacrament, we're probably trying to focus, but a little bit of us is thinking about something else. So mindfulness is the practice and the business of just being in this moment. So in this moment, just look at me. Just look at me and breathe and be with me. And stop worrying about what the kids are doing and who's out of bed and what you're going to have for supper later. And just be in this moment. And as you allow yourself to do that, your whole system starts to calm down. And that is part of self-care. But it's hard work because we're always thinking, oh, what about the, and what if the, and so being present is absolutely, you know, it's the gift, isn't it? That's why it's called a present. That's a joke from Kung Fu Panda, by the way.
I've got to see that one now.
Yes, I like to read, you know, and get my sources from everywhere.
Okay, so I have another question. Thank you for taking us through that exercise. I've never done it in that way before, in terms of counting up and down with the different senses. How can we reach out to sisters when they are wanting to withdraw and not be with anyone? How can we let them know we care and respect where they are?
I think we can name it. I think we can say, I think you just want to be by yourself. And I know about that part. I certainly know about that in myself. And if I was saying this, I would say, what I have learned for myself is that no matter how much time I have on my own, it's never enough. I always want more. And that actually what heals me the most is connection. Even if I resist and resist and resist the idea of someone else around, and think I just want to be by myself. A week of being by myself, 2 weeks being by myself, it's never enough. So I would name it. I would say, yep, I bet you do want to be by yourself. I know about that, but I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to be here anyway. I'm going to send you messages anyway. So too bad. Here I am.
So a plug for harassment from Sarah Miller. Joking. Next question. Naomi, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Are treatment for depression and anxiety the same?
No. So depression, so the first thing to say, depression and anxiety can go together. So you can get those together, and you can just have depression and you can just have anxiety. So the nice guidelines are that depending on, if you like, the causes for depression or anxiety, medication can be helpful. So you can get what are known as anxiolytics, which are antidepressants that also treat anxiety. You can get anti-anxiety medication, and you can just get antidepressants. So that's the medical perspective. From a psychotherapist perspective, my perspective is trauma informed. So I am very interested in how is this person's response now how can I map that back on their early experiences? Bear in mind, I do a lot of work with trauma, so my perspective is slightly skewed in that way. So for example, I'm working with someone at the moment who's incredibly anxious, but who grew up in another country where his mother was bipolar. So his anxiety now is real and he's treating, but we're actually dealing with the past trauma of the experience. So we put those two together, and the more he understands about, oh, that's why I feel so anxious. But that isn't to say that he isn't receiving antidepressant treatment from his GP. He is. I hope that answers the question.
Gets complicated. So I have another question. How do we action compassion and self-care when we are low, anxious or depressed? Also, how do we recognize emotional triggers and intervene beforehand? So this is a question around, trying to be preventative.
Yeah.
And
I think it's going back to that earlier thing about, I would ask people, what's possible, what's doable? So if everything feels really difficult, do what's possible. So is it possible just to do the 4-6 breathing? If that's all you can do today, and then the next day, then do that. And then you might think, okay, is telling somebody that I don't feel very good, is that possible? No, I don't know, maybe, so it's starting with what's doable and then adding just small degrees of success. Low is a different feeling from being depressed, so it might be worth checking out, am I low or am I depressed? And you'll need to consult with someone professional in order to understand that. But start with what's doable, I would say. We can all breathe. I hope we're all doing breathing. Everyone on this call is breathing, yes? Nodding, good. So if you can breathe, then you can do 4-6 breathing. Yeah, and think of your breath as the anchor. That's how I like to think about it. The breath is the anchor. So you can't have a panic attack and breathe well. The two don't go together. So if you're feeling anxious, breathe. Do 4-6 breathing, and that will bring you back to the present. So already you're back in the present. You're aware of your body. Your breathing patterns changed. Wow, things are different. So think of your breath as the anchor.
Lovely, lovely visualization there, Sarah. Naomi, do you have a question?
Sure. So it's kind of a comment and a question. Thanks for this session. When you mentioned the mentality of get on with it, it struck with me because that's how I was raised, which has made me less sympathetic and compassionate with people who think otherwise. Now I'm learning to be more exposed to the condition of anxiety and depression. I have become more understanding. How do you get the balance of enabling someone's behavior who is suffering from anxiety and depression and encouraging them to get on with life because you don't want time? I think it's because you don't want them to miss the positive parts of life.
Well, I would go back to my earlier answer, which is to really say what's possible, you know, what's possible today. And I think if someone has been, you know, very depressed for the last 3 months, I might say, again, I think it's okay to be really open and honest and say, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about your motivation. I'm worried about your energy. I'm worried about how doing nothing kind of increases your sense of hopelessness, because it's only when we get the feedback. It's only when we engage with other people that we can actually co-regulate with them. So we need the feedback in order to kind of know where we are. So I think, to me, it's just about being authentic and saying, you know what, I'm really worried about you. And but what you don't want to get into is what we call the kind of gas brake relationship, where you put the gas on, come on, hurry up. And particularly with adolescents, if you put the gas on, they just put the brake on. Have you done your homework? Yeah, in a minute. You know, you'll just get into that situation. So we can't push anyone. We can't motivate anyone by pressing our foot on the gas. But we can say, hey, I'm worried about you. How do you think I could help? And then that opens up a dialogue, you know. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. No, well, it's just that, you know, I've noticed you've kind of had really low energy for the last few weeks. Again, I'm concerned. No, I'm fine. Leave me alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone because I'm worried about you. So, you know, and you just kind of gently but firmly, I think, just open up the conversation. Don't be afraid to say stuff. I think. My trainer used to say to me, be as naive as possible. Just ask naive questions. Because you'll notice with kids, they'll just come and go, why are you crying? And how do you, right? And you kind of have to answer that question. So I think as a therapist and as a, you know, a ministering sister or anybody, it's okay to say, what's up? How come I don't hear from you? What's going on? That's allowed.
Thank you. So, and I have another question here. As the amygdala works as a smoke alarm for the brain, what happens to those who have the amygdala removed?
Ooh,
I'm just wondering under what circumstances would that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of that. I don't know. An amygdalotomy, I don't know. I've no idea. I would imagine that their threat system wouldn't be working. So, but the amygdala does lots of things. I don't know is the honest answer. Sorry.
Okay. I recognize it's 5 past the hour. We've got a couple more questions.
I'm fine if everybody else is.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to stay online, or does Zoom come in and say, get off?
No, we have total control over this meeting.
You have total control then. Exercise.
Yeah, exactly. Naomi, over to you.
Sure. Okay. How do those with borderline personality disorder find treatment when they also suffer anxiety and depression? It seems the best treatment for anxiety depression is connection and care, but that seems the most difficult with borderline personality disorder.
Yeah, well, it is a specialised treatment. It's long-term treatment. There are what are known as DBT groups, which can be very helpful. They're long-term psychotherapy. Borderline personality disorder, whenever I'm working with it, I prefer to think of it as an attachment disorder. So there's some things happened in the early attachment. So I think personality disorder, it's like, great, thanks for that. You know, it's not a helpful way of describing what's really going on. So the short answer is there are treatment options available. They are long term. So you either need to work with someone who understands attachment, which will be psychotherapists. I'm not sure about, I don't know if counsellors are really taught that, but certainly psychotherapists are. And you know, any psychotherapist will know how to work with an attachment issue. And certainly the NHS offer DBT groups. So again, you'd need to be referred, you need to go through your GP to get that referral. But of course you're anxious if you have any kind of attachment issue. Of course you're going to be anxious and depressed. That goes along with that diagnosis.
I just have a follow-up question actually with some of the things that have been mentioned. How do you know when you should see a therapist? And how do you find the right one?
Yeah, those are really good questions. Well, the simple answer is some people come for psychotherapy for what we call symptom relief. So if you are coming because you just want to feel better, and which is great, so that might be shorter term work. If you're coming for what we call a kind of script rewrite, which is that you keep doing the same things, you're getting into the same difficulties, things repeat, like with bosses or you know, close relationships, things keep happening over and over, that might be worth spending a bit more time in therapy thinking, these patterns keep happening and I'm not sure why, because therapists are taught to look at patterns, to be curious about them and to help you make sense of them. And you can, you know, you can interview as many therapists as you like, and you kind of just have to have a feel and think, oh yeah, I could work with that person. Most therapists will offer a kind of initial session, and then you can decide at the end of it, is that the right person for me? One of the issues that can come up amongst our faith community is working with somebody who doesn't practice or doesn't have the faith. There can be some problems where people can say, oh, well, you know, it's your religion that's making you anxious, you should just leave it. So that's not, one, it's not good practice, and two, it's not true. So you may think, well, actually I want to work with somebody who understands things like covenants and my faith and the importance of it. So there is a list of LDS psychotherapists who practice in the UK. Certainly state presidents and state relief society presidents have those lists. And really it's a case of, you know, meeting with someone and saying, you know, do I connect with this person? Do I feel that they get me? They shouldn't be doing all the talking. That's one clue. If you meet with a therapist and they just do nothing, you know, just talk all the time, which is something I am doing now, but I don't do normally, then just say, no, thanks very much. Shut up and listen to me.
Great. Okay. And I guess I have a follow on from that one that someone has said. Can an anxious person get rid of anxiety in one day after a lot of therapy?
Wow, that would be a lot of therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you know that anxiety comes from your thoughts, so thoughts, feelings, how you think affects how you feel, which affects what you do. So you're all going to be cured now because I'm giving you the cure. So if you feel anxious, if you feel anxious, it's because you're thinking anxious thoughts. If you decide to change your anxious thoughts and use self-compassion rather than judgment, then you're halfway there. But bear in mind that anxiety disorders are real. They're not something that just goes in a day. I think, it kind of suggests that, oh yeah, you go and see a therapist and it's all over. I'm much more an advocate of kind of being curious and being interested in our learning as a kind of, as a gradual thing rather than just looking for some quick fix. I'm not a great believer in those personally. It's a process. There are very few events in life. It's all process, isn't it?
Yeah, very good point. Over to you, Naomi.
Thanks. So yeah, I think it was just a follow-up comment from the person who initially said, is it normal to interrupt psychotherapy a little while ago? And I think we commented on it because of the pandemic. And yes, they've said that is what happens. I feel alone in this case. And I was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I also suffer from anxiety.
Well, yeah, that needs, if you're not receiving the care you need, then make noise and go and get it again and say, look, I'm halfway through my treatment. I need some help. And don't stop until you get it, really. Particularly if you're struggling with bipolar, then absolutely you need as much help as you can get. I'm surprised that unless you particularly felt like you didn't want to see your therapist online, therapy should have been made available. I mean, to be fair, I have had people say, I don't want to work online, but I'm actually doing okay. I wouldn't, if I was worried about somebody, I would explore lots of options before I said, yes, let's stop. If you don't want to work online, like some people would just prefer to speak to me on the phone, but some kind of contact is really important. I wouldn't just stop therapy with someone unless they wanted to stop with me. But anyway, yes, I think I've made my point.
I'm just going to have one last question and then we'll close for the evening. Sure. What's the best way to help someone who is diagnosed as depressed, and how can you help them progress? I think there's such a strong desire for members of the church to help and want people move forward in various different ways. We talk about goal settings and moving towards the next thing. And
yeah, I'm not a great believer in all of that, to be honest.
Love to hear how you throw that out of the water. Go, Sarah.
Yeah, well, it all kind of leads into that whole perfectionism nonsense and the idea that, the kind of the belief is that where we are is somehow a failure. So if I'm depressed, I've failed in some way. I'm much more, the first thing that a psychotherapist has to do in order to become a psychotherapist is, guess what? Go to therapy. So if I am wanting to help someone with depression, then I need to know about the depression in myself. I need to know about my own sadness. I need to know about my own fears and distress. And every time I want to push someone along who's, come on, you've been lying there long enough, I need to ask myself, is that how I treat myself? So I think, somebody made a point about, not enabling someone, but I think there's much more to be gained from thinking, what am I learning about this person who's depressed? What am I learning about my own response to their depression? And how do I treat myself? And how am I trying to treat them? If I'm telling them to get a grip and hurry up, is that how I treat myself? And therefore, can I treat myself differently first?
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Sarah. It's been such a pleasure spending the night with you and you imparting your wisdom and your...
Very scandalous.
Those who are left here, can everyone just put on their videos and we can do an exercise in increasing some oxytocin, and we can wave and smile to each other. Everyone put on your videos and wave goodbye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Lovely to have you all here.
Lovely sight. It's fabulous. I love it.